Sean Hannity finally opened up, and there's something disarming about watching a man who built his career on hard facts and fierce debates suddenly speak from the heart. One of America's most recognized conservative voices, Hannity, 63, took a break from politics and television to talk about something deeply human: love. His emotional confession about the woman he calls the love of my life surprised fans and softened the sharp image many thought they already knew. But did they really? I was a dishwasher at 12, a cook at 13, a busboy, a waiter, a bartender for a lot of years. Then I was a painting contractor. I hung wallpaper. I framed houses. I was doing construction. I listened to talk radio all day. And one day I'm in Santa Barbara, California, and I find out that the local college has... Sean Patrick Hannity was born in Queens, New York in 1961, the youngest of 4 children in a close-knit Irish-American family. His father, Hugh, worked as a court officer, while his mother, Lillian, was a corrections officer at a county jail. It wasn't a luxurious life, but it was one grounded in discipline and community. Those who knew him as a boy say Sean had a stubborn streak, the kind of persistence that either drives parents crazy or leads to greatness later on. Growing up in Franklin Square, Long Island, he was just another neighborhood kid working odd jobs, mowing lawns and tinkering with anything he could get his hands on. But it was the sound of radio that captured his imagination. Late at night, when most kids were asleep, Hannity would tune in to talk radio, fascinated by how voices through a speaker could spark national conversations. By his early 20s, he knew he didn't want a regular 9-to-5. He tried his hand at construction, painting, and bartending, but his heart kept returning to the microphone. His first real break came when he landed a volunteer gig at a college radio station in California. It was small, unpolished, and unpaid, but to Sean, it was everything. From that tiny California station, Hannity moved to bigger markets, eventually hosting shows in Alabama and Georgia. His relentless drive caught the attention of producers who saw potential far beyond radio. The timing was perfect. America was entering an era when political talk shows were becoming cultural powerhouses, and Hannity's bold, unapologetic style was exactly what networks wanted. By 1996, his life changed overnight when Fox News, then an ambitious new network, chose him to co-host a program alongside liberal commentator Alan Colmes. The show, Hannity and Colmes, became an instant hit. Viewers were drawn to the nightly clash of ideologies, and Hannity thrived on the tension. He didn't just debate, he demanded to be heard. Years later, when The Sean Hannity Show launched as a solo program, his voice became one of the most recognized in America. He interviewed presidents, criticized policies, and often stirred controversy, but through it all, one thing never changed: his relentless energy. Off camera, though, Hannity wasn't as loud. Friends and co-workers often described him as surprisingly reserved, a man who valued loyalty, privacy, and faith. The persona America saw each night was the broadcaster. The man behind the scenes was reflective and grounded. He often spoke about his faith, his family, and the simple things he missed from childhood: Sunday dinners, his parents' voices, and the honesty that came from humble beginnings. Those who knew him best saw that while Sean Hannity might have thrived on professional chaos, what he truly longed for was peace in his personal life. And that's where his story takes an unexpected turn. I really am a believer that of myself I could do nothing. I believe every single thing we have in this world is a gift from God. Before the fame and before Fox News, Sean Hannity was just a young radio host trying to make it. It was during those early years that he met Jill Rhodes, the woman who would become a central figure in his life. Jill was a journalist working at a local newspaper in Huntsville, Alabama. When she first heard Hannity's voice on the radio, he began calling her for story tips, and soon those professional calls turned personal. Both young, ambitious, and driven, they quickly developed a spark that grew into something lasting. In 1993, they married in a simple, heartfelt ceremony filled with optimism and love. Hannity often credited Jill as his grounding force, the calm to his storm. As his career soared, so did their family. Their first child, Patrick, was born in 1998, followed by their daughter, Mary Kelly, in 2001. Those close to Hannity during that time saw a different side of him, the devoted father at tennis matches, the husband who prioritized family despite his demanding schedule. But life in the public eye comes with a cost. The long hours, constant travel, and scrutiny of fame began to take their toll. As Hannity's career reached new heights, his marriage started to quietly unravel. He never spoke about it publicly. He rarely does. But those close to the couple say that years of pressure built an invisible wall between them. By 2019, after more than 2 decades together, Sean and Jill decided to part ways. The divorce was finalized quietly, without the drama or scandal that usually surrounds celebrity breakups. There were no bitter statements, no tell-all interviews, just 2 people who had shared a life deciding to go their separate ways. But that silence spoke volumes. It showed respect, not only for each other but for their children. Even after separating, Hannity and Rhodes co-parented with remarkable grace. Their kids remained their top priority, and friends said Hannity stayed deeply involved in their lives. For Patrick, his father's support was unwavering, especially throughout his tennis career at Wake Forest University. For Mary, Hannity was the dad who always showed up, for her sports, her studies, and the small moments in between. Privately, that period was difficult for him. Hannity was a man used to control, of conversations, of narratives, of public perception. But love isn't something that can be controlled, and heartbreak can't be reasoned away. Those who worked with him noticed a subtle shift. The man who once filled every silence with certainty began speaking a little slower and thinking a little deeper. He spent more time reflecting, leaning on his faith, and finding peace in quieter moments. Friends said he grew more private than ever, not reclusive but protective. He stopped discussing relationships entirely, even dodging lighthearted on-air questions about dating. To many, it seemed he had decided that love was no longer for him. But behind that guarded exterior, something else was unfolding. A slow, quiet rediscovery of what love could mean the second time around. He had lived through the peaks and valleys of fame, the satisfaction of success, and the pain of loss. He'd learned that not everything in life could be managed like a broadcast schedule. So when years later Sean Hannity spoke about finding the love of my life at 63, it resonated differently. No, Sean Hannity is a conservative. There's no pretense here. I'm not Ted Koppel. I am a person. It's branded. This is a conservative show. I really am a believer that of myself I could do nothing. I believe every single thing we have in this world is a gift. After his marriage ended, Hannity didn't make grand announcements or public statements. He simply kept doing what he'd always done, showing up. Each night, millions tuned in to watch him deliver sharp political commentary, but off camera, his life grew quieter. Those close to him said he began to prioritize moments over milestones. He reconnected with old friends, devoted time to his children, and explored hobbies that had nothing to do with politics or television. For a man driven by deadlines, that shift was profound. Still, his career never slowed. His radio show remained one of the most listened-to programs in America, and his nightly TV show continued to dominate ratings. Yet something about him seemed changed. The fire was still there, but beneath it was a man learning balance. He once hinted that he'd come to value gratitude, the quiet appreciation of what truly matters: health, faith, family, and peace. He no longer seemed interested in chasing validation. For someone who had spent decades in the storm of American media, that realization was monumental. During those quiet years, Hannity built a disciplined routine: early mornings, workouts, prayer, and then work. Colleagues described him as almost monk-like in focus. He didn't date publicly, avoided high-profile events, and refused to entertain gossip. He guarded his privacy fiercely, but beneath that discipline was still a longing, not necessarily for romance, but for companionship, the kind that makes you feel seen when the cameras are off. No matter how successful, no one is immune to loneliness. And for Hannity, who had built walls around his private life, letting someone back in wouldn't be easy. What he didn't know was that the next chapter of his story was already unfolding in the same building, with someone who had walked her own path through love, loss, and resilience. You ended up getting a divorce, but your faith kept you very strong throughout it. Yeah, that was a really hard period in my life, but we are amicable, and we co-parent very well. My name is Ainsley Earhart, and I have worked at Fox News for 14 years. Ainsley Earhart wasn't just another television personality. She was a journalist who had built her own name in the demanding world of broadcast news. A South Carolina native, Ainsley brought warmth, grace, and optimism to everything she did, quickly becoming one of Fox's most beloved morning hosts. But behind that bright smile was a woman who had faced her own share of heartbreak. She had gone through 2 marriages that didn't last and was raising her daughter Hayden as a single mother. Her faith became her anchor, the steady force guiding her through life's turbulence. In many ways, Sean and Ainsley's paths mirrored each other. Both had spent decades under the same network's roof. Both had endured public scrutiny. And both were learning how to rebuild after loss. Their connection began quietly, rooted in friendship. They had known each other for years, crossing paths in Fox's studios, sharing brief conversations between broadcasts. But somewhere along the way, those conversations deepened. What began as professional respect evolved into something more personal. Ainsley admired Sean's discipline, his devotion to his children, and his faith. Sean admired her strength, her warmth, and the unshakable positivity she carried into every room. Their mutual respect became the foundation of something neither had planned for. Soon, people around them began to notice. They were often seen together at network events, traveling in similar circles, sharing moments that hinted at a deeper bond. Still, both remained discreet. They neither confirmed nor denied anything, choosing instead to protect their privacy. For Sean, that choice was intentional. After enduring the public scrutiny of his first marriage, he wasn't eager to open his personal life to headlines again. But those close to him noticed the change. He laughed more. His usual intensity softened. Ainsley brought out a gentleness that rarely appeared on camera. Their shared values, faith, family, humility, became the core of their connection. They began attending church together, often sitting quietly toward the back, blending into the crowd like any other couple seeking peace, not attention. It wasn't a flashy romance. There were no red carpets or magazine exclusives. It was simple, steady, and real. When Ainsley began hosting her Bible study segments, Sean was one of her biggest supporters. He praised her insights on air and encouraged viewers to watch. Privately, he told friends how deeply he admired her kindness and faith, how she managed to stay gracious in an industry that rewards confrontation. What drew them together wasn't the thrill of opposites, but the comfort of alignment. They were both public figures with private hearts, both searching for something genuine in a world that often values appearance over authenticity. Their relationship, though quiet, grew into something meaningful. Those who saw them together didn't need confirmation. They could feel it. For Sean, who had spent years guarding his emotions, the connection was healing. For Ainsley, it was a reminder that even after heartbreak, love has a way of finding you when you least expect it. Then came the moment that changed everything. The heartfelt confession that made headlines and reminded everyone watching that even the most guarded hearts can find courage in love again. Ainsley Earhart wasn't just another television personality. She had built her own name in the demanding world of broadcast journalism. A South Carolina native, she brought warmth, grace, and optimism to her work, quickly becoming one of Fox's most beloved morning hosts. Behind her bright smile, however, was a woman who had endured heartbreak. 2 marriages that didn't last, and the responsibility of raising her young daughter, Hayden, as a single mom. Her faith had become her guiding compass, keeping her steady through life's turbulence. Sean Hannity's and Ainsley's paths mirrored each other in surprising ways. Both were veterans of the same network, both had endured public scrutiny, and both were learning how to rebuild their personal lives after loss. Their friendship began quietly, rooted in professional respect, but over time, it deepened. Conversations that once revolved around work became more personal. Ainsley admired Sean's discipline, his dedication to his children, and his faith. Sean admired her strength, her warmth, and her unshakable positivity. Mutual respect became the foundation of their growing bond. People around them began to notice subtle changes. They were often seen together at network events, traveling in similar circles, sharing moments that hinted at a deeper connection. Still, both remained discreet. Sean, having endured the scrutiny of a public marriage, was careful to protect his privacy. Those close to him, however, noticed a shift. He laughed more, he was lighter, and Ainsley seemed to bring out a gentleness rarely seen on camera. Their shared values, faith, family, and humility, formed the core of their relationship. They attended church together, quietly blending into the congregation, building a connection grounded in understanding rather than spectacle. Their bond wasn't flashy. There were no red carpets or magazine covers, only moments of steady companionship. When Ainsley hosted Bible study segments, Sean was a supportive colleague, praising her insights and encouraging viewers to tune in. Privately, he told friends how much he admired her outlook, her ability to remain kind in a world that rewards confrontation. What drew them together wasn't opposites attracting, but similarities aligning. They were both public figures with private hearts, seeking something genuine in an industry built on appearances. Their relationship quietly evolved into something deeper. Those who saw them together could sense it, even without public confirmation. For Sean, who had long guarded his emotions, the connection was healing. For Ainsley, it was a reminder that love could return unexpectedly. Then came the moment that changed everything. A heartfelt confession that would make headlines and show that even the most guarded hearts can still find courage in love. It wasn't during a political broadcast or scripted interview. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Sean spoke softly, with a tone that lacked his usual commanding certainty. He talked about gratitude, about those who stand by you when life gets messy, and then, seamlessly, about finding someone who truly understood him, the love of his life. For a moment, the fiery political commentator vanished, replaced by a man at 63 acknowledging the beauty of second chances. He didn't name names, but those who followed his journey knew exactly who he meant. The power of the moment wasn't just in the words, but in the sincerity, the pauses, and the subtle smile that crossed his face. At this stage in my life, I'm just grateful. I found someone who makes me better every single day. That line became a turning point, not only in how the public saw Sean Hannity, but in how he saw himself. Gone was the man who hid behind work. In his place stood someone who understood that real strength comes from vulnerability. At 63, Sean had entered a new season of life. For a man who spent decades debating politics, his most meaningful revelation wasn't political, it was personal. Love doesn't follow a timeline, doesn't care about public opinion, and sometimes the best things in life happen quietly, away from cameras. His confession rippled far beyond his usual audience, catching longtime viewers off guard. There was no spin, no spectacle, just honesty. For many, it humanized him, deepened his connection with fans, and showed that vulnerability is not weakness. For Sean, it marked a personal turning point. The guardedness that once defined him began to soften. Though he remained careful, never fully an open book, Sean Hannity's story, culminating in his confession at 63, carries lessons that go far beyond politics or fame. Even though he remains private by nature, there's now a visible warmth and calmness in him, a confidence born from knowing that love is no longer something to hide. At this stage of life, he isn't chasing reinvention or trying to reshape his public image. Instead, he's embracing reality, gratitude, companionship, and the quiet assurance that comes from being loved for who he is, not what he does. The profundity of his confession lies in its universality. It reminds us that even those who seem larger than life are searching for the same simple truths: connection, acceptance, and enduring love. Hannity's story isn't just about rediscovering romance later in life. It's about the courage to begin again. Lesson 1. It's never too late for happiness. Hannity's revelation at 63 shows that life continues to surprise. Love has no expiration date, and joy can appear long after the storm has passed. Lesson 2. Vulnerability is strength. In a culture where toughness is often measured by stoicism, his openness demonstrated that true strength sometimes lies in letting your guard down. By admitting his feelings, he didn't lose authority, he gained depth. Emotion doesn't diminish resilience, it amplifies it. Lesson 3. Gratitude transforms perspective. Hannity framed his love story not as a personal triumph but as a blessing. Having lived through loss, career pressures, and public scrutiny, he understands that success alone is hollow without someone to share it with. His appreciation for this love makes his confession profoundly moving. And perhaps the most enduring lesson is that people evolve. The Sean Hannity of today is not the same man who appeared on air 20 years ago. He's shifted from fiery and restless to reflective and thankful. His journey shows that the human heart doesn't retire. It keeps hoping, keeps searching, and when the timing is right, finds what it's been seeking all along: love. It's a story of patience, courage, and the quiet power of a second chance, proof that the heart's capacity for renewal doesn't diminish with age.